Sounds good.
And I will also make you a presenter while I'm gonna have Scott. I'm gonna have Scott go through some of these links here.
You want me to do that?
I do because
Yeah, let's go.
you should do it. All right. So welcome to EDU Endpoint Office Hours. Today is September 17th. Believe it or not, we are definitely into the school season, so we appreciate you all being here with us today. Today we are joined by Arnab, who is going to walk us through Platform SSO for Mac OS, a new feature that's a combination Entra solution with Intune combined to give you a great SSO experience for Mac OS devices. Highly sought after for a long time customer ask. So that has finally gone GA. I believe GA, and so you can utilize this today. So we'll have him do a deep dive into that. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of other things upcoming. October 1st, we were going to have our own Matthew Brown, one of our customers at RCPS, Rutherford County Public Schools, join us and talk about his Intune journey. That is scheduled for the next session on October 1st. And then on October 15th, we will have Liz Cox, who's another PM product manager on the Intune team, talk about the newly announced expanded device inventory feature within Intune. So look for that on October 15th, and then hopefully on October 29th, we'll have a fun Halloween type episode. I think we had a lot of fun last year with that. If you are new to EDU Endpoint Office Hours, we do like to try and have fun. So if you didn't see our Halloween episode last time, it is on YouTube, and you can go check that out. So with that, I'll progress forward and I'll kick it over to you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. So for those that are new, I'm Scott to Endpoint Office Hours. I'm Scott Ellison, one of the technical specialists, or one of the hosts for this show, along with Richard and Anthony and Shanil and all the other team. A few things that I wanted to bring out around Windows Client. Specifically, we put in some links today about the Copilot experience on Windows. So that is going to be changing from 23H2 to 24H2. So we've also made some announcements around when you're signed into a Windows device with an Entra ID account. We used to have something with that called commercial data protection. Now we have something called enhanced data protection. So this is going to change the way that Copilot is presented in Windows. And right today, if you running 23H2, you'll probably notice that there is a Copilot icon down in the sys tray. So this experience is going to be changing. Maybe we can reserve a time in a future session when 24H2 goes GA. We can talk about all the new features in 24H2, talk about the Copilot experience, but there's some links in there that I feel that I would strongly recommend that you read those and take a look at those once this session is over. A couple of things also coming as well to Mike. Garrett, do you still want me to go with Intune here?
No, Scott, I'll go ahead and Intune.
Oh, but all right, you take that one then.
But the last link on the Windows client that says taking steps that drive resiliency. That link is it's a blog post from our VP of Security, David Weston. So a while back, we had probably about a month ago, actually, we had made an announcement that we were going to have a security summit to bring in all of the security vendors, CrowdStrike, Sophos, McAfee, all of those folks. That actually happened about 2 weeks ago, that event, and so the outcome of that was blogged by David just a few days ago. I think it's probably maybe a week ago. I checked that out if you're interested in understanding what came about from that conversation that we had during that summit with all of the leading security vendors. So it's a fairly lengthy blog, but it kind of goes through and explains the steps that we're going to be taking moving forward with them. And then Garrett, go ahead and shift it to the next slide. So for Microsoft Intune, a couple changes that have come out. We spent a lot of time last time going over the changes for the last service release. But one change that we announced yesterday that Twitter and Reddit and all the socials are talking about it is the important changes to the Windows enrollment experience coming soon. It doesn't really tell you much in the title. If you actually click on that link and go to the blog post, it basically tells you that in 24H2, when you go through autopilot, you're actually going to start to get cumulative updates installing during the out-of-box experience through the autopilot process. Where that's actually going to happen is it'll happen at the end of the enrollment status page. We'll then start to install the latest cumulative update. There's no way to control it. If you look through the blog post, we mentioned that there isn't going to be a way to control the experience just yet. I don't know if that's going to change at some point because it happens at the end of ESP. You could kind of think that maybe there would be a way for us to control it through a CSP somehow. So TBD on what this experience is going to be, is how this is going to be managed moving forward. But suffice it to say that we will be installing cumulative updates now during the out-of-box experience after the enrollment status page is complete.
Wait, really quick on that. Do a thumbs up. Go ahead and react. Do you like that? And then don't react if you don't like that. I'm just curious. Who's excited about that?
No pitchforks, please.
No. It's a legit question. There's a mixed opinion, right? Everyone has a different. There's no right or wrong. We don't think any differently. I'm just kind of generally curious. This has been a customer ask for a number of customers of mine. So I know some are happy about it, others might not be. So I'm just kind of generally curious.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo that, I know Dan, you just made a comment. You're already getting PCs that already have 24H2, and not seeing that yet. That's going to be, if you go dive into that blog post, it says with the October update. So
yeah, it'll be,
you shouldn't, that's the key piece there. If you're still not seeing it yet, Dan, that's by design because it hasn't shipped in the October update. Probably you'll see it in the September preview release, right? I think that's also called out in the blog, Richard.
I don't recall if it's going to be a September preview, but 24H2 is not GA'd yet. So GA won't be until later this year. So you can probably guess it's probably be October, given when all this stuff's happening. But yeah, it's one of those things that some people like it, some people don't. A lot of people have asked for this, but then a lot of people don't want the time it takes to get to Windows to be longer. They want to get to the desktop faster, and they're okay with the cumulative update that's required to come while the user's signed onto the machine. So, it's one of those things that you're probably going to have a mixed reaction to it. But that's one of the big things that a lot of people have been talking about the last couple of days. The second link here, we resolved an issue where if you were using app protection policies within Intune when targeting to all apps or all Microsoft apps, any new app that we added to all apps or all Microsoft apps didn't actually get included in the app protection policy. So that has now been resolved. So for any of you guys that have been using app protection policies while targeting all apps, that should now be fixed. And there was a message center post about this over the last month or two, but just want to let everyone know that that's been fixed.
Also, another reaction really quick. Anyone actually using MAM today? App protection policies to all apps for mobile devices? Okay, Dan.
Dan's doing it all.
Maybe that's a good future topic because I think that's one of the benefits of Intune in most customers licensing with 8.3 today, right? You do have mobile application management. So if you have, there's only certain apps that are supported today, but you can secure those apps. So all your base Microsoft apps, right? Outlook, Teams, etc. Really good way to prevent organizational data from leaking out. So really good practice for those personal devices. You could do MAM without enrollment, or you could do MAM with those enrolled devices. So that might be a good future topic too.
Well, Dan, you have made me very disappointed. I thought you did everything, but you're not doing MAM. It's all right though.
It's okay. We'll convert you eventually.
All right. Well, I think that's all from the updates. It was a very light week this week. Last week we had a ton more. Last time we had a lot more. So all good.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott and Richard. And then I see there's a couple of questions in the chat. So one question that came up was, is there a way to block TikTok apps inside of Intune? There are. Specifically, I've had a number of customers. I see, is that Heidi? If I said your name correctly, thanks for putting the app blocker policy in there. Yeah, that's one way that we can do it. And then for mobile devices, for other platforms, there's a few other ways that we can do that. And then I also tend to recommend most customers use Defender for Cloud, or previously known as Cloud App Security, to put policies in place or put block unsanctioned apps, and you can make TikTok an unsanctioned app in that service. So if you're leveraging that today, it tends to be a multifaceted approach there, and I've got a document that I can send you there.
Could you
and
please,
then-
yeah,
Yeah,
could you please
absolutely.
send me that document, because our state governor
Yeah.
put the rules that we need to block on all the state given devices.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why.
If you're in the state of Texas, then that's
Yes.
pretty common. So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. And then there was another question, Janae, that if I need to block the Xbox services, does it require a PowerShell script, or is that a policy that can also be enabled? I don't recall offhand. Richard, do you remember offhand, or is that a follow-up we should take?
So what some people do is they'll remove the Xbox apps out of their image using a PowerShell script. The one challenge or one problem I've seen with that is if you're in K-12 and you have Minecraft. Minecraft actually, in the past, I don't know if this behavior has changed in the last couple of years, but if you wanted to do like any screen sharing or any screenshots or anything out of Minecraft, it actually tied into the Xbox services. So if those were removed, you might actually have you might just see random error messages come up in Minecraft. If you're not in the K-12 space and this is in higher ed or academic medical or something, then you could remove those apps. But if you're talking about like blocking going outbound to like Xbox services, like, over the network or something like that, then, you could do that through a number of different ways. But I'm pretty sure you're probably talking about just the Xbox apps that are within Windows.
Yeah, and that's a great call out specifically for Minecraft, because if you're not familiar, there is a Minecraft Education Edition. So a lot of K-12 teachers are leveraging Minecraft in the classroom for skills, not just coding or anything like that. There's a lot of curriculum based around that in science classes and things like that. So just make sure you test and get feedback there.
Yeah, just to expand on that Xbox question, there is an Xbox app, but I think it's the Xbox companion app that's hidden. It's not necessarily in the menu list. I think that's the one that has the actual screen recording. You can leave that in there, but remove the Xbox app, I believe, which would then, and then the other thing I always recommend is block Microsoft Consumer app accounts from being added to your workstations as well. So that also, so they can't add it as an account and use the Outlook.com or the Hotmail.com to sign into Microsoft consumer-based services on Windows.
Yeah, that's a great call out too, Scott. Awesome. Okay, with that, Arnab, are you ready?
I am.
Awesome. Well, I will kick it over to you. So again, this is Arnab. He is part of the Microsoft Intune team. He's a senior product manager, really focused on Apple management, I believe, kind of all up, but with a specific focus on, he's my platform SSO guy, so I tend to default my questions to him. But Arnab, thank you so much for joining us. And if you have something to share, feel free to share your screen. You should be a presenter.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. Hello, everyone. My name is Arnab Biswas. I'm a senior product manager. As Garrett introduced me, my specific focus in the Apple team is our Mac management strategy. And I am here to talk to you about platform SSO. One small correction from what was said earlier today is platform SSO is currently in public preview. We do not have a GA date to share yet, but we're expecting sometime next year. And while Intune is the This is really a partner feature between Intune and our Entra ID counterpart, but this is very much an identity provider feature. So our sister team owns that feature. So any new settings you see that are available going through our day zero support for Intune settings catalog, you'll see that appear in Intune. However, some of those settings may require that there needs to be underpinnings in the SSO extension, which is required for platform SSO. Anyway, I digress. So, a lot of the content that you'll see today, there are some great talks by Michael Epping from our Entra team, who does a phenomenal job covering this topic in much more depth than I will today here. I have taken some inspiration from his content. So I wanted to just give him credit for that. In the limited time we have today, here is what I plan to cover. I'll do a little bit of framing around, why did we need platform SSO? Why are we here today? And then dive into the high-level overview of platform SSO and its benefits. I think there's a ton of confusion around what it really does because there are several aspects to it, and there are other solutions in the market, and people. But I want to tell you the whole story of, this is not just a password sync solution, but it does so much more that I think people should really learn about as they think about deploying platform SSO. And then the most exciting part is probably the demos. So I will cover all the 3 authentication methods we'll talk through, and I have demos for those. And then we'll cover the requirements that you need, and talk about also user creation and privileges. All right. So with that, let's talk about why are we here? Why do you need platform SSO? So if you have been keeping tabs in the macOS space, in the macOS identity space, there has been some native enterprise identity options like LDAP bind. I think that has been around for over 2 decades now. Kerberos is fairly new, but still been around for 5-6 years. But those were really meant for very much on-prem solutions that are perimeter-based, or you need to be connected to a VPN. Other popular third-party options that are very well-known are Jamf Connect, Xcreds, or Nomad, which is kind of the open source version of Jamf Connect. And all of those are very well adapted in the industry, in the enterprise, but are really dependent on agent-based solutions to keeping the password in sync with the identity provider, and then popping up web browsers on top of the Mac login screen. So these were, while well adopted for Microsoft, and also thinking about our Entra ID authentication and the zero trust principles and architecture that we want to move forward, we really felt that this didn't advance our zero trust goal. So whenever customers would come and tell us, "Hey, I want a password sync solution, when are you going to do that for Mac and Intune?" Our answer was never, because we want macOS to be really more like Windows, where the platform needs to support the ability to support cloud identity and be able to sync those. And since then, we have Microsoft has driven a partnership with Apple to really bring that forward and really come up with these enterprise use cases and scenarios, and what work needed for that to happen. So to just cover the challenges that were with the on-prem solutions, it really was not meant for devices that were not connected to your on-prem corporate network, because it needed line of sight to domain controllers, and also there were no modern phish-resistant options, and that we'll talk more about. And of course, the user experience also took a hit because of the on-prem dependencies. And because much of this is not a native solution, it was you really needed to figure out the multiple tools you needed to really create a solution. And what does that mean for your on-prem resources versus your cloud resources? So it was a lot more complex. And in the same period of time, I would say, Windows really shaped that enterprise customer experience on desktop from an identity perspective. So when I went and spoke to our Mac customers who are also managing Windows in Intune, the typical very common feedback we heard is like, oh, I just want parity with Windows. I want to be able to have any user be able to log into the Windows machine with their AAD username and be able to log in. And of course, hardware-backed credentials are a big part of meeting compliance requirements for many customers. And Windows Hello for Business was also a great value prop for Windows Enterprise. So all of that really created this customer need to have more modern identity option for macOS. So Apple, to our great excitement, Apple announced the Enterprise SSO extension for identity providers back in 2019. And the first sort of release was really about providing single sign-on experiences that are still enabled by MDM and configured by MDM. And it was based on primary refresh tokens. So that is the architecture that our Entra ID systems are based on. And we could take advantage of that. And back then, that was a really significant moment for managed Macs, because when you enrolled a Mac, your experience a lot of the times really suffered because of the number of authentication prompts that you would see, because there was no single authentication broker on macOS. It was really dependent on each developer managing their own keychain. So even within Microsoft, if Microsoft OneNote developed using or signed their application using a different installer certificate from Outlook, that means you would see two prompts for those apps. So we call these the SSO islands that would form. And so having enterprise SSO really meant that now the SSO plugin would be in charge of managing all of those authentication requests and be able to intercept those as apps needed to authenticate to the identity provider. And all of that could be managed using MDM. So yeah, it was great to be able to cut down that the SSO authentication prompts from, I believe, what used to be 6 prompts to turn on all the apps in at all the first-party apps from Microsoft to down to 2 authentications. So one for when you're enrolling the device and one for when you're actually signing into the SSO extension. So that was great to see. But there were still some shortcomings, some drawbacks. So while it gave us great SSO across cloud resources, it still didn't have any local account credential management. There was no password sync or hardware-bound credential support. And one of the other scenarios we saw was that while we use device registration, that key could be now backed up and to iCloud. And then if you just simply migrate it to your device, that could be replayed on an unregistered Mac. So that is not quite related to enterprise SSO at the moment, but I'll talk more about how that is something that is solved by platform SSO as well. So what is platform SSO? So platform SSO really builds on the innovation that Apple brought about in 2019 with the enterprise SSO extension. It built on top of that to really provide built-in macOS capabilities for tying your local password to your identity password, as well as tying your local hardware, so your TPM chip, your secure enclave, to the device's identity and to the user's identity. So that you can have a more higher factor of authentication and security when you're using platform SSO. So the second point here is about using hardware-bound keys. So what I mean by that is you're not doing a typical workplace join when you're using platform SSO. It is actually using a private key from your secure enclave to join the device to Entra, such that that request can now only come from your device. So this is a device record that cannot be, a device certificate that cannot be backed up to iCloud or cannot be, taken off the device and put on another device and it'll work. It has to come from your device for it to work. So it's not prone to man-in-the-middle attacks and is much more secure. And I'll talk about all the different authentication methods, but platform SSO basically allows you to meet up to the phishing-resistant MFA experiences, which is basically equivalent to Windows Hello for Business. It uses the same protocols and the same sort of upsells as Windows Hello for Business, but on macOS. And we will talk about and show you how this helps you do passwordless authentication and also use passkeys on the device. And also if you have other Android or other Apple devices that can save passkeys, you can use those across devices. And the other big plus for I think what Windows users would be expecting is just-in-time user creation. So that means you can pick up a managed Mac and sign in using your work credential without having a local account on that device, which is huge, something that has never been done on a Mac before, but now that is possible with platform SSO. And when that user is signing in, using MDM, you can also define what are the rights for that user. Should they be a standard user, an admin, or even more granular group definition, which is something that's coming later. Oh yeah, and of course, did I mention that? Sorry, this works built into the platform. It's part of Intune core. No agent required. There's all it's using is the SSO extension that is configured through MDM, turned on via MDM, and it is the macOS platform providing you this capability. All right. So some key things to remember here. As I mentioned earlier, platform SSO works using primary refresh tokens. These are refreshed every 4 hours on the device. But suppose you are taking a trip, you're on a plane and you do not have connectivity, while the PRT will fail to refresh, but you will not get locked out from the device. You'll just, the next time you connect to the network, it is going to try and get a PRT before you can access any cloud resource. And I mentioned Passkey. Passkey flow allows for phishing-resistant interactive authentication, and that is applicable to both when you're using secure enclave or the smart card as the authentication methods, and we'll talk about that. Passkeys are not available when you're using just the password sync mechanism in platform SSO. I mentioned Entra join. So what is Entra join? Entra join is a new capability on macOS that is going to replace the legacy workplace join, which we have been using to give you access to conditional access protected resources. And as I mentioned earlier, the legacy workplace join suffers from some of the shortcomings of just having that device certificate live in the keychain and the ability to back up and restore that and replay that on another device. But when we tie that device certificate to the hardware of the device, that is unique to the device, it cannot be backed up to the cloud and cannot be used on another device. So this is a much harder proof of trust that your device can demonstrate when doing conditional access. And so currently, Entra join happens during platform SSO, and there's a requirement for platform SSO, but you can expect to see, I believe later this year or next year, where Entra will move to a point where they will require that the default be hardware-bound device record. So we're going to phase out workplace join and have Entra join be the default form of device registration that's required. And the other key point here is that the device certificate I mentioned, that is the device registration record, that is created as part of Entra join. In this new model with platform SSO, it can only be used by the SSO extension. So some of you might be familiar with this prompt that you might see when another developer is trying to access the keychain to access the workplace joint certificate. This used to be the previous model where your workplace joint certificate lived in the keychain, and you could grant access to other developers to that. But as we move to this hardware-bound device registration model, it essentially means the SSO extension becomes the broker for anything related to registration or authentication, and the apps need to be able to support that if they have a conditional access scenario. So a typical example is if you're using the Chrome browser, which I believe uses different technologies to talk to macOS and doesn't support the native APIs for platform SSO. So our Entra team is actually building a Chrome extension that will allow then the Chrome browser to talk to platform SSO as a sort of a subsystem that sits in between the platform, the macOS as well, and the browser. So let's talk about authentication method strengths. So when I talk to customers, most people just ask for, hey, I have Jamf Connect. I have a password sync solution. Just give me that. When are you going to have that? But platform SSO is so much more than that, if you're thinking about deploying platform SSO, you should really understand the implications of the choices that you're making in the MDM configuration that you set up, and also the organizational goals or compliance requirements that you have. So I stole this page from my Entra friends, and I think they can go a lot deeper in it. But the core of the message here is Microsoft recommends customers to use secure enclave as the authentication method, because that is the passwordless method, as well as it is stronger than using password sync solution with even MFA, because when you're using secure enclave, it means your traffic is not prone to man-in-the-middle attacks, or the bad user actually needs access to not just your credentials, but to your device to actually get access to that resource. So it's a lot harder to beat than any typical password or MFA prompt. And we expect that as the federal government is now mandating phish-resistant authentication as the minimum bar for the federal organizations, that we will start to see the enterprise shift in that direction as well. And for Microsoft customers, we have been telling them to move towards a zero trust model, and this plays very well towards that goal. So unless absolutely necessary to use password in situations, we highly recommend using secure enclave as the way to go. And smart card is another method that could be used. It would require some more infrastructure and has some other shortcomings, like you cannot use passkeys as part of platform SSO, but that is also a pretty good alternative to using password. So here's the recommended platform SSO MDM configuration that you should deploy through Intune. So here you see two authentication methods here, but one is actually, the top one is currently deprecated by Apple, only supported on macOS 13, whereas the new authentication method is what applies to 14 and above. But if you have devices that run 13, you still need to set this one. And the other key thing to remember is, so Apple announced platform SSO in 2022 when I believe macOS 13 came out, Ventura came out, and then since then they have added new features every year. So what that means is you can have a single profile, and a subset of those features might work on 13, a bigger subset might work on 14, and so on. But we still recommend deploying a single platform as a profile to your devices. So in any case, if a device gets a setting that it doesn't know what to do with, macOS just marks it as not applicable. So you don't need to do the guesswork of what should go to what device. You should just configure one that applies to your full device state and the things that you want to configure. And a platform as a profile can also replace your previous enterprise single sign-on extension profile. So that's the stuff that only managed the SSO across applications. The other key thing to mention here is this key called use shared device keys. It's an optional key. But if you're using platform SSO, we highly recommend turning this on at the beginning, because all the new features that macOS 14 Sonoma introduced actually depend on this key, and turning on this key later on would require the user to do re-registration, which is additional burden on the user and support. So if you're turning this on, you should just have it on, so that makes you more future-proof. All right, so now let's dive into all the password methods, all the authentication methods and some demos. So first we'll take password as the authentication method. So the idea for authentication method as password is really to sync your Entra ID password with your local account. This is the classic requirement of having a solution that basically eliminates the need to have a local password, because now you're just using the same password that's synced to your local account. When using platform SSO, that is the idea. Your password is still never sent over the air, just as clear text. It's always encrypted, and your device is still getting a hardware-bound device registration record, because that is the bar for platform SSO. But it is still less secure than using something that is not a password. And the other complexity that comes here is because organizations also like to enforce password policies through MDM. So now you need to, which actually applies first on the device when you enroll it before platform SSO applies, especially can happen on corporate devices, automated device enrollment. So you need to make sure, as you're planning for platform SSO, that the MDM password policy actually matches your Entra password policy rules, because otherwise password sync is going to fail. So once you have the device registration and successfully done, and the password has synced, and the device actually has the primary refresh token. Anytime the user is unlocking, the device is acquiring the PRT token from Entra. So if it's basically looking at whether the device has been, is the token more than 4 hours old? If not, it will try to use that to get refresh tokens and access tokens to get access to the resource. Otherwise, every 4 hours, it's going to try and refresh that token. And if your password changes, say your cloud password changed outside the device, when the device goes to get the refresh token, that's going to no longer work. In general, Entra does not wait 4 hours. Your current tokens are invalidated. So even if the device tried to use that token to get access to something, the cloud service will actually block you and prompt you for a new password. And even with all this goodness set up, password is still required when you're rebooting the device, because that is still, if it's an encrypted drive, the firewall still requires your password. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 authentication method settings. One applies to 13, one applies to 14. All right, so let's look at what this looks like. So the user clicks on the notification, enters their password to unlock the secure enclave, and then do a full interactive authentication to register. Some of this might be a little fast, but I'll cover it in more detail after the demo, so you won't have to catch the whole thing. All right, so once the device registration has happened, this is the point where the user is entering their cloud password, and that is now going to be saved to the device, and your local password is now synced to, or rather your cloud password is now synced to your device. And you get that message. Now, if I launch any of the Office apps, I'll have single sign-on active, and I am good to go. So now my password has been synced to the device, as well as single sign-on across apps is active. Great. All right, so what did you just see? So the user just went through all of these prompts. It's a lot of prompts. First of all, Apple requires that when you're setting up platform SSO, the user needs to opt in, even if you have configured it via MDM. So the user actually needs to see this prompt, click on it to actually initiate the process. And then in step 2, this is where you're basically giving the local user password, doesn't have to be an admin, the local user password to unlock the keychain to initiate the device registration process. Unlock the secure enclave, because the device registration needs to be hardware bound. And in number 3, the user does the interactive authentication, whether that is 2FA or using passkeys, if that's enabled in the organization, that can be done here. And once the device is successfully registered, then you'll see this prompt where Entra is trying to sync that password to the device. And on 14 and above, you get a nice notification that says your password is now synced. And you get to name whatever organization you want the user to see here. So that's kind of the flow for authentication methods password. It does get a little bit complicated, which is feedback we keep providing Apple, because here you're asking for a local password and here you're asking for the cloud password. Nobody likes to read. And yeah, I can see a lot of issues here with having a user correctly follow this in the first run. So enter secure enclave, which is a much easier path, as you'll see. I think I've already talked about all the goodness for secure enclave. It is passwordless, it is phish resistant, your local machine username password remains unchanged, that's never attached and can still be managed by MDM. Same way it gets the hardware-backed PRT for device-wide SSO, and Secure Enclave allows you to use a passkey, so you can register a company portal as a passkey manager. In the settings app, I'll go through that. And this also enables you to then use Touch ID to unlock the machine after you have entered your password to unlock the device once. And you can also use Touch ID to then log into apps and websites. All right, so let's see how that works. So again, you see the notification, click on it, you unlock your Secure Enclave, and you would have to do your interactive auth here. And the just-in-time registration happens, and that's it. Your device is registered, no passwords to sync or anything. What the user needs to do here is turn on company portal as the passkey manager here. And yeah, you can go here under users and groups, and on the username, you can see the platform SSO registration is on. Now, if we go to any of the Microsoft websites, you'll see you have single sign-on turned on. It's detected. Everything is good. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Okay, so this is the flow for passkeys. So because you enabled passkey, now you can use Touch ID to authenticate here. So this means that, and you saw in this case, it was Touch ID. If you had a passkey on your iPhone, you should be able to use that here as well to log into this, to log in to access this resource. So yeah, this is super smooth, does not require using a password. And I think the end user experience is a lot better than it is for when authentication method is password. So again, just in a quick glance, the Secure Enclave registration is pretty straightforward. You click on the link, enter your local password, do your interactive authentication, and that registers the device. And then this last two steps is really just to turn on the passkey usage feature. All right, and then the last method, which is really the second, it's the less good than Secure Enclave, is if you're using a smart card. So the idea of using a smart card is you're still getting passwordless authentication, but using a separate piece of hardware, which is either a YubiKey or any sort of comparable hard token, but that is an external device. And the idea is that you are using your smart card PIN, which unlocks the certificate on the smart card to authenticate the user. This will, the smart card PIN actually unlocks the machine as well as the Entra ID and gives you a single sign-on. So let's see how that works. So again, you start the registration flow and you enter your password, and then to register, you enter the PIN that unlocks the certificate that is then used here. And now you can enter the PIN to actually sync your sync the PIN locally. And that means now when logging in, you can use the smart card PIN rather than your actual password. And the user is registered via the smart card method as required in the MDM payload. All right, and we have SSO. Okay, so what you saw here is registration prompt and platform SSO asking you to enter your local password, and then the actual registration, and that's also requiring your PIN, and then After successful registration, the PIN is again required to get the platform SSO token using the smart card certificate. All right, so now the last part, or rather the second last part I want to talk about is user creation and privileges. So on macOS 14, all this goodness that you get by turning on shared device key in the payload, these are the key settings that macOS 14 enabled. So first one is about the enable create user at login. So this basically is what allows any user in your organization to type in their username, password, cloud username, password, and on the fly have a local account be created for them. So no password sync needs to happen because there is no local account. You are creating that account and running with it at the same time. And the other important thing here that it lets you define in the platform SSO payload is user authorization. So you have two settings. One is new user authorization and one is user authorization. The first one is for the rights, the user rights for the first session when they're logging in. Maybe they need to set up their environment, and that might require a higher level of privilege than their persistent user authorization mode when they are, day 3 logging in and just doing their job without requiring admin privileges. So Apple gives you control over if you want those rights to be different. So you can have maybe admin rights for the first session, whereas a standard user rights for all other session onwards. So this really allows you to manipulate these privileges and get the right kind of rights that a user should have when they're logging in. So only standard and admin are currently in public preview. The groups option is will be supported in the future, and what this will allow you to do is so if you treat standard and admin as kind of the spectrum of all the different rights you can have, groups will then allow you to have standard plus certain privileges rather than a full admin privilege for a particular user, and to be also able to do within a single platform SSO profile, you can then grant a group could be admin, or a group could have rights to install application, or rights to run certain processes if there's a help desk admin or something like that. So this groups really unlocks a lot of more interesting scenarios where it's now possible to grant the user rights that are in between standard and admin and still have their job done. So yeah, that's something we look to bring in the future. Probably going to be post general availability of the platform as a feature set. All right, so how does new user creation work? So here, the other key thing to remember is, I just remembered from here. So there's a login item payload where you have to turn on this other option for platform SSO enable at login to work. So there are actually 2 steps here. It's not sufficient to just set enable user at login. You have to make sure that your login item payload shows this other option so that it gives the platform SSO user a way to sign in. Otherwise, this option doesn't show. All right, so here I am trying to sign into this device where I've never signed in. When I click on other, I see my I can enter my username where I can actually enter my identity provider, my full UPN for my organization, and enter my cloud password. Guess I entered it wrong when I did it first. And that should now allow the device to actually talk to Entra, verify that is indeed the user's password and be able to sign you in while creating an account for you. So yeah, something that is super powerful in enterprise environments, especially in shared device scenarios, in education, and something that we're very excited about. And yeah, now as the user's account is getting set up, they will need to do, the device is registered, but there's now a concept of device registration and user registration. So this user still needs to enter their user password to allow this. So yeah, you see another prompt, and that will complete the user registration for this user, and then single sign-on will be turned on. All right, so the last 2 minutes, I will quickly cover important considerations. So multi-user scenarios. So as you saw, Platform SSO enables multi-user scenarios, but from an MDM perspective, there is still a single managed user on the device. When a device checks in, it is we are not able to have a true multi-user use case where, sorry, a true multi-user check-in where it can tell us who that user is. So this is still tied to a single user. Conditional access also works with a single managed user. And that is something we, for Entra join to the also extend to managed user to be a true multi-user scenario, we need Apple's help to support that through MDM check-ins first to really guarantee that we're can validate that the user who's signing in is the user whose policies we're getting from Intune. And the other key thing to remember here is if you are using the MDM password policy, we recommend using the settings catalog to set the password policy, because that allows you to set change at next auth to no, because otherwise the moment you get the password policy, it is going to reset your existing password, and that will cause problems for device registration. And that is also why we would avoid setting it in compliance policy, because that in the background sets a passcode policy with change at next auth to yes. Ideally, you can use a password policy when setting up automated device enrollment with final configuration, because that then enforces you to have the MDM password policy that you want when the local account is getting created. And then, so you have no gap in the password complexity. You just need to sync the cloud password to your local password. And specifically in education cases, temporary access password is a good alternative to set up initial short-term passwords that will anyway get changed when it gets synced. We have a good documentation on this, specifically targeted for students, so please check it out if you haven't seen that. All right, I know I've rushed through the last few slides. Let's see, questions? If people want to come off mute and talk, that might be faster.
Yeah, it looks like there's 2 questions in the chat, one from Kyle, one from Dan. I don't know, Kyle, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. The first was the Chrome extension. You talked about that. Is that out or still to come?
I believe we are, the Entra team is actively working on it. It might be out. I'll have to look at the documentation and see if it's actually out, but it's very close to being out, I believe.
Okay. And then the next question was for the groups when you were talking about standard and admin accounts. Are those the local groups on the machine or groups in Entra?
Good question. Those are actually Entra groups, but I believe the work that really needs to happen is those groups have some sort of a representation locally as well, and that's how I think the macOS assigns the authorizations on the device.
Okay, I was just curious for like an example of the SSH group. You have to be part of that to SSH into the machine. Is that the kind of group synchronization you're talking about?
Yes, yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
there'll be Entra groups that actually get mapped to local groups.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
And then Dan, I don't know, Dan, if you're there.
Yeah, so you were talking about the secure device enclave part of it.
Mhm.
I'm a little confused because you said the device password and then you register the secure device.
Mhm.
Or it asks, so like, but if you have FileVault install like running when you reboot the device, what unlocks the device? You enter, you put your token in, or
So yeah, so your local password still unlocks the device, and if you're using authentication method as the if you're using password as the authentication method, then your Entra password does become your local password. So then you're basically using your Entra password to unlock your FileVault encrypted device.
okay, so it's updating the FileVault. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you should still use your local password like you do. It just
Okay,
might be synced to the cloud.
all right, and it was only the pins, or if you use a smart card is when you can set an actual pin.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And Randy?
So we've been trying to play with this a bit for the last couple months, and one issue we're running into is with shared devices. So say there's two students, one logs into the device, goes through the registration, signs out, the second student logs in, goes through the registration, signs out, or then in between, the first student's password changes. When that first student goes back to log in, the new password never syncs to the device. So it just, no matter what, the old password is the only one that works until eventually at some point, I don't know what triggers it, no password works.
Okay. I believe we are aware of some of these issues with password syncing not working properly. Is there support incident that's open with us?
No.
Okay. I think it'll be good to capture this and make sure our identity team is aware of it. I've heard some of these cases where the password sync may not happen as expected. But yeah, this use case seems to be like a slightly different one. So I want to make sure that we're covering this, whatever the fix is.
Okay, cool.
Otherwise, so did you say it? So the next time they log in, they're still having to use their old password?
Correct. Yeah.
Huh. That's pretty bad. Okay, and they're able to still. So they say password change. I go back. The device accepts my old password and is able to access resources after that?
I wouldn't be able to answer that confidently. Okay.
Because that would be really bad. Because I would think even if you had to enter your old password, EDU would realize that's like your PRT is no longer valid and should prompt you to enter your new password immediately. Would be my expectation.
We do get the registration notification does pop up.
Oh, so it pops up again, even if
right. So you log in with the previous password and then the registration notification pops up.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Let me just, if you can please put your email in the chat, I will make sure we don't lose this piece of feedback, or you can just IM it to me. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll follow up.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, that looks like all the questions. And we're about 6 minutes over. So thanks a lot, Arnab, for everything. Platform SSO is a big deal for a lot of our customers. So thank you. Garrett had to drop off, so he'll be getting the recording and everything up to our LinkedIn page. So look for that there. And with that, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.